It's the end of the day. Your dog circles the dog bed twice, the way they always do, lies down, rearranges their legs once, and then lets out a long, low exhale through the nose, the kind that seems to deflate their whole body half an inch into the floor. You've heard that sound 1,000 times. You've probably even said something to it, half joking, "Rough day, huh?" And maybe you've never once stopped to ask what that sound actually is, mechanically, inside your dog's body, in the half second before their eyes close. We're going to get to the bottom of that exact sound in a minute, because it turns out to be one of the more quietly remarkable things your dog's nervous system does every single day, and almost nobody explains it correctly. The casual explanation floating around is that the sigh is basically a tiny performance of exhaustion or mild annoyance, your dog being dramatic, blowing off steam the way a person sighs after a long commute. And there's a reason that story sticks, because in humans, sighing has a long cultural association with frustration, disappointment, giving up. But here's what's strange. When scientists actually went looking for that connection in human research, in a large multi-sample study tracking real people sighing throughout ordinary daily life, they found sighing wasn't reliably linked to negative mood at all. The folk theory turned out to be only half right even in our own species. And in dogs, the picture is, if anything, even more tilted toward the opposite explanation than people assume. So what is a sigh, physically? Start here, because almost nobody walks through this part. A sigh isn't just a bigger breath. It's a distinct, separate breathing event, a deep inhale roughly twice the volume of a normal breath, sometimes layered with a second, smaller inhale right behind it, called a double sigh, followed by a slow, audible exhale. And for decades, nobody knew exactly where in the brain this command was coming from, or why a mammal's breathing system would build in a separate gear just for this. Then in 2016, a team led by Stanford's Mark Krasnow and UCLA's Jack Feldman tracked it down. Working in mice, they identified a tiny cluster of neurons in the brainstem, in a region called the parafacial respiratory group, that released specific signaling peptides directly into the brain's main breathing rhythm generator, a structure called the pre-Butzinger complex. When that little neural switch fires, your dog's normal steady breathing pattern gets briefly overridden and forced into one big exaggerated breath. This circuit isn't unique to mice. The pre-Butzinger complex sits at the core of breathing control across mammals, dogs included, which is part of why every mammal anyone has ever studied, from rodents to humans to dogs lying on a dog bed, produces this same basic two-stage breath. Here's why that switch exists at all. And it's not about emotion first, it's about plumbing. Your lungs and your dog's are made of millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. During shallow, steady breathing, a small percentage of them gradually start to collapse, deflate slightly, the way a balloon left half-inflated slowly sags. A sigh is the lungs' maintenance routine, a periodic deep breath that mechanically reinflates those collapsed sacs and resets normal breathing back to full efficiency. Every mammal does this automatically, all day, mostly too small and frequent to notice. The booming sigh your dog produces right before sleep is the same mechanism, just landing at a moment when their whole body has gone quiet enough for you to actually hear it. But that's only the lungs. There's a second layer here, and this is where it actually starts explaining the emotional read you're getting off your dog. Belgian researcher Elke Vleeminckx and her colleagues at the University of Leuven spent years studying sighs not as a lung maintenance reflex, but as what they call a psychophysiological resetter. Breathing, it turns out, has a kind of rhythm signature, sometimes tightly regular, sometimes erratic, depending on what's happening in the body and mind. Vleeminckx's team found that right before a spontaneous sigh, breathing variability tends to drift out of its healthy range, either locked too rigid or scattered too randomly, and the sigh functions like hitting a reset button, restoring breathing to its normal, comfortable variability immediately afterward. It's not a symptom of stress, it's the body actively correcting course back toward a stable baseline. Now connect that reset to something measurable inside your dog's actual nervous system, the part that explains why this almost always shows up right before sleep specifically. Your dog's heart rate is constantly being pulled in two directions, sped up by the sympathetic nervous system, the gear built for alertness and action, and slowed back down by the parasympathetic nervous system, running largely through a long nerve called the vagus nerve, the gear built for rest, digestion, and recovery. Researchers measure the balance between these two using something called heart rate variability, and one consistent finding across veterinary studies is that calmer, more settled behavioral states in dogs are reliably associated with patterns indicating stronger parasympathetic, vagal activity. Interestingly, dogs show an even more pronounced version of a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia than humans do, meaning their heart rate visibly speeds up on the inhale and slows on the exhale, a direct physical signature of the vagus nerve doing its job in real time, breath by breath. Put the two findings together, and the bedtime sigh stops looking decorative. It's most likely the moment your dog's body crosses fully from one mode into the other, alert system standing down, rest system taking over, with a long exhale acting as both the lungs reset and the outward signature of that internal handoff. That's not your dog performing tiredness for your benefit. That's a nervous system changing gears, and the sigh is the sound the gear change makes. This is also exactly why a single isolated sound like a sigh is such a hard thing to read on its own, and a 2024 study out of the Waltham Pet Care Science Institute makes that point clearly. Researchers exposed 60 dogs to a range of scenarios designed to trigger different emotional states and tracked which physical signals actually lined up with negative arousal versus positive calm. Several individual behaviors, panting, whining, sudden body shakes, tracked reasonably well with negative arousal on their own, but isolating positive calm states turned out to be much harder from any single signal, and the strongest indicator wasn't one behavior in isolation at all. It was a holistic read of the dog's overall posture and demeanor, what the researchers called qualitative behavioral assessment. In plain terms, no single sound or movement, sighing included, tells you the whole story by itself. It only means something once you read it against everything happening around it, which is precisely why the same exhale can mean two opposite things depending on the eyes, the spine, and the 10 seconds that follow it. So how do you actually tell a content sigh from a stressed one? Because dogs do sigh in both states, and the difference isn't in the sound, it's in everything around it. The American Kennel Club's behavioral guidance notes a simple but genuinely useful distinction here, one worth watching for tonight, that a sigh paired with half-closed, soft eyes and a settling body tends to signal pleasure and release, while a sigh paired with fully open, alert eyes, especially one that repeats while your dog stays tense or upright, tends to signal disappointment or frustration instead, the same exhale doing two completely different emotional jobs depending on what the rest of the body is doing around it. If your dog circles, flops down, sighs once, eyes drifting half shut, and goes still, that's the reset functioning exactly as designed, the lungs clearing house and the vagus nerve taking the wheel for the night. If the sighing repeats every few minutes while your dog stays bolt upright, ears tracking every sound in the house, that's a nervous system trying to find the reset button and not quite reaching it. I think about the dogs who come home from a stressful vet visit, wound tight the entire car ride, refusing to settle on the kitchen floor, pacing a small loop near the door, glancing at every sound from the street, and then sometimes 20 minutes later, sometimes an hour, there's a single audible exhale long enough that you actually look over, shoulders dropping a fraction, the tail finally going still instead of tucked, and the legs finally fold underneath them properly instead of staying half-braced for standing back up. Owners often describe it as the exact moment they stopped worrying, watching their dog instead of waiting for them. That's not a coincidence in timing. That sigh is very likely the physiological marker of the actual moment the threat response let go, the audible proof that the nervous system finished its argument with itself and the parasympathetic side won. It's worth noticing too that this is rarely the loudest moment in the room. It's the quietest one, which is part of why it gets overlooked so easily, mistaken for nothing more than a tired animal getting comfortable. So go back to that dog bed, that long exhale right before the eyes close. It isn't your dog being dramatic, and it isn't a tiny performance of exhaustion put on for you. It's two real separate systems doing their job at once, a set of brainstem neurons clearing the lungs the way they do dozens of times a day, mostly invisibly, and a vagus nerve announcing, in the only language a body has for this, that it's safe now, that the alert system can stand down for the night. Every dog you've ever heard sigh before sleep has been showing you the exact instant their body decided the day was over, and you were the reason it was safe to let go of it. Have you ever noticed your dog's sigh sound different depending on their mood? A contented one versus a frustrated one? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. That's a wrap for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.